Hey everyone, welcome to Ink Scribes, the comics podcast where we discuss the art and craft of comics. I'm Colin Singh, an aspiring comics artist and lifelong student of the craft. I'm joined by my co-host Eric Zawadzki, the artist on Assorted Crisis Events from Image Comics, and Taylor Stauft, creator of From Fire and Blood, a Jason Jang adventure. Today, we have a very special guest joining us, Nickolej Villiger, a fantastic comics artist, the artist on Mara Llava, which you can read for free online, and we're going to have a link for that down below. You can also check out Nickolej's stuff on his Instagram, Almost Home Free 1984. He's got a couple of projects he's working on right now, which we'll get into a little later. But Nickolej, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. I'm elated to be here, guys. Glad to share space with you.
Great. Glad to have you.
Yeah, when I knew we were going to do a Alex Toth episode, I knew I had to have you on, Nickolej.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, dude.
Absolutely.
Audience, if you're looking at his stuff right now in the separate tab or something, you can see why.
Actually, yeah, let's just briefly take a look at some of Nickolej's work. Is it safe to say Alex Toth is one of your biggest inspirations when it comes to your art?
Absolutely. I have no qualms about saying that. I'm proud to say I'm in the school of his work. I'm a disciple of, just like he was, of Kniff and Frank Robbins and Noel Sickles, all of those guys. So for me, I'm kind of an unabashed fan, his work shines through mine. And I do try and think about when I'm working, what would Alex do? Obviously, I'm inspired by a lot of different artists and try and incorporate a bunch of different things into my work. But he's definitely one that kind of shaped my current development as a comic artist.
So that's interesting. We have a fight page here on the right. Were you thinking about the famous Black Canary page when drawing this sequence?
A little bit. I think just kind of playing around with forms and space, absolutely. The more cartoony automatopoeia and things along those lines was definitely something that I was probably drawing a little inspiration from.
And the collage of like a collage of people of the figures fighting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I just think it's kind of a fun little thing to explore. But he's one of those artists that, when he does that, there's such an iconic kind of approach to how he does it. And when we get to that page too in this book, we can talk about that more in depth. But it's very, very interesting, his approach on that stuff.
So yeah, and we'll get to that soon. But I'm just intrigued by the fact that you did this work for one of the syndicates, like just within the last several years, which you don't hear about the syndicates much these days, I guess.
No, you don't. I mean, the format's changed a lot, right? To say that newspaper strips were the same way that they were in the 40s would be really disingenuous, because everything has changed a lot lately. Newspapers are not even what they were like when I was a kid, where I would open the Sundays and there would be a whole dedicated section just to Sundays, full page.
Oh, it's great.
Full pages. And
you get that whole section. Yeah.
And actually, funny enough, I am obviously, like most kids, I was inspired by a lot of the superhero stuff at the time and things along those lines. But where I really cut my teeth, where I really started to love comics, was those newspaper strips, was dailies. In particular, Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes.
A running theme on our show.
Yes. I mean, I think pretty much his run on that is unmatched.
Oh, yeah. Can't be tough.
Till this day.
Schultz, of course, is the king. But when we're just talking about comics that are introspective, verbose, completely off the wall and zany, but at the same time heartfelt and grounded, I don't think there's a better example of than Calvin and Hobbes.
No.
It's one of the best comics that have ever been produced, in my opinion.
It pushed the visuals emotionally and also just like technically, like all in one. Like you got it. It was a unlimited budget, and he really used the page, especially the Sundays.
Yeah. Seeing a T-Rex fly in F-14, where else are you going to get
that? yeah, exactly. Or even if it was all white space with just Calvin and Hobbes like hugging in an offset corner of the page, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, too, is that his style, like the economy of his line, I remember that was the first time when I was younger looking at art and being like, oh, there is a certain quality to this that is just beyond touching a pen to paper. It's how you form those lines, how you do those things. And so I think a lot of my expression and kind of feel and flow of how I do lines largely comes from Bill Watterson.
Right on.
But a lot of my structuring and storytelling and just in general approach to making comics largely comes from Toth.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive in, because I don't think we've explained to the viewers what this episode is going to be. Let's see. Today we're going to be covering probably one of the most revered comics among creators in the industry, which is this 2-part, 16-page Black Canary short story by Alex Toth. Yeah, is that safe to say that it's probably like, when you're talking with other comic creators that this story comes up often?
Absolutely, yeah. Just to the audience, the aspiring artists in the audience, these 2 issues are like, you got to go out and get them. Like, these are like textbook, Holy Bible things you keep in the nightstand. These 2 issues are definitely that.
I'm embarrassed to say this is the first time I read them, and because I really only know Toth from the design work he did for Space Ghost. But now I got to get more. Now I'm fiending for it because it's just so. I don't know. Maybe you guys
Once
know.
It hits your lips.
Yeah. What is this style? I want to call it mid-century modern illustration, but it's not that. It's a lot more structured than that. But it's
so I should say that Alex Toth didn't do these covers. Do you guys know who did these covers?
They look like Bob Oxner covers to me, but I'm not sure.
The main story was Jose Delbo, inked by Bob Oxner, so that was probably it. But yeah, I should say there's multiple stories in this, and we'll get to the Toth story eventually. But just briefly, we'll take a look at this stuff. Nickolej, I believe you're a big fan of the inker here, Bob Oxner. I don't know much about him.
Yeah, he was a Supergirl artist for quite a few years, and he worked for DC, but he also did romance comics. And a lot of those guys, when John Romita and Buscema were working on romance comics, as was he's kind of in that era. And I loved his stuff because it was kind of a cool intersection between the Dan DeCarlo Archie stuff and then the kind of more rugged, put together stuff of the DC era in the 70s, right? The Jim Apro, Neil Adams thing. So like, it was really kind of cool kind of seeing an intersection of that, but he drew some of the prettiest ladies in comics for sure.
Yeah, he does. They got real gams on him.
Yeah, I love just this, like you could tell he's a fan of like a lot of good girl art and things along those lines, because he always kind of had those like Gil Elfgren style faces, right, with the bright twinkly eyes and the kind of cheeky smile, right?
And then we've also got a Phantom Stranger story in here, which I couldn't find a credit for this. I'm assuming this is like a 50s story that was just reprinted here.
It sure reads like that, eh?
Yeah, it's hard to see, but that looks like a Bill Drott art there. It looks really quite nice. He has a very distinctive style.
And I mean, I guess they weren't really crediting artists in the 40s and 50s. That was kind of a 60s thing when artists started getting credits.
So according to this is from Fandom Wikia, so take it with a grain of salt. But Nickolej, you're right. Bob Oxner doing the cover, and for Phantom Stranger, it's Carmine Infantino pencils, Bernie Sachs inker.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's
but cool. The main part of the show is Alex Toth, Black Canary. So, when did you guys first read this? I guess we found out Taylor only just recently. What about the rest of you guys?
Yeah, in the last couple of years, I've read it.
This was, I want to say I read this about a decade ago. That was when I was first introduced to it. I've read it a few times since and gone back to it. And when I was really trying to understand Alex's process and just his approach to comics, I remember I would spend a lot of time inking over his inks,
right on.
Trying to figure out like what pens was he using, what approach was he using here, why did he fill in blacks here or spot blacks here where he could have left, where most other artists probably would have left that white or something like that, right? Or just left a blank page. Those types of things like really captured me when I first saw his work. And so I remember these pages in particular, especially the page on the right there, was a page that I absolutely pored over for like an entire week, I think, just dissecting it and trying to figure out how he framed his scenes and how he formed his figures, all of that.
Some great art push-ups. Yeah. Figuring out.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I did want to bring up panel 5, and this one is it's like masterfully done paneling, how he established it in panel 2, that the teacup is actually on the newspaper.
Yeah.
And behind I guess that's a lampshade behind the newspaper. And how in this one he uses all that just to shoot you across to the right.
Yeah. Move in and zoom out so that and reorient. I've noticed he's very good at that. I'll bring it up in the second issue. Yeah, where he's great at reorienting you.
Something I like about this is that Toth is known for being a perfectionist, but at the same time, he's not precious about his line work, which is something I'm constantly chasing in my own work. I think I'm a bit of a perfectionist myself, but I think perfectionist artists can run the risk of the final piece looking stiff and lifeless. But here, the line work is so loose and organic that it just retains all the energy. Like, yeah, he's just sort of like throwing these newspaper lines down very quickly. And yeah, just again, not being precious about it.
But he is also making sure to replicate the look of classified ads, because that's what she was reading. And they did have that very distinct, like little stacks of boxes look to them. For the younger viewers, you used to be able to put personal ads and or requests into newspapers, which is the internet in the form of a tree.
Yeah, it's the old school Craigslist.
Yeah.
I love the graphic quality of this Black Canary.
Yeah, it's great.
Logo here, which I always like to compare artists and what I think works and doesn't work. And I think while this stuff is great, it does have kind of an old school quality to it. Whereas this, for some reason, comes off timeless to me. And there's a playfulness that I see in the storytelling that I don't see as much of in that 70s work, that other 70s work from other artists.
You don't see it much now.
Yeah.
I think that was the largest, or one of the very first things that attracted me to Alex's work. Just a little background on me. I used to, before I had even really considered getting into the comics game, I was a professional graphic designer for many years. And typography and focal and just, understanding the entirety of the space that you're using so you can command everything was so essential in graphic design. And a lot of times I do think that there are very talented comic artists, but they don't necessarily have that, they're more technical than any of us here. They can draw circles around us. They can, fill up a page with fantastically rendered figures, things along those lines, but they don't necessarily think about the graphic design elements, and how you display those things, and what that's going to look like for the viewer. And one of the things that I learned when I was looking at Alex's storytelling is that he knew exactly when to add flash and pizzazz and graphic design flares, but he also knew when to make panels pedestrian to move along the story. And I think that's something that is missing in a lot of modern work. I'm not saying all of it. Obviously, there's some fantastic stuff, but there is some. I do think that some artists tend to lose the plot and they forget about that, right? And you see things like where every panel is a splash page practically, right? They're trying to cram it in a full-on action scene in every single panel, and it doesn't always work. Sometimes they do need to be pedestrian. Sometimes they do need just to move along the story. And you have to consider, too, at the time, and this is actually maybe true for all comics in general, but they had to be done under breakneck deadlines. You wonder if Alex would have gone over and maybe redone some of his line work, maybe done a panel over if he wasn't satisfied with it. But at the time, you just had to let it be. And when I think of comic work, I think the best comic work to me is comic work that is expression forward first. The technical stuff isn't superfluous, obviously. It means a lot, and especially adding weight and structure and gravity and depth and space and whatever else to it. But expression should always be at the forefront. And if you're kind of, as Eric was saying, refining, that expression element gets totally lost. That kind of free form, just put the line on the page, let it be, tends to disappear over time because you do so many iterations of it, right? Yeah. And then it starts stiff. It starts to look. And I think Alex just had a brilliant way about doing his work, that he was a perfectionist. And if he didn't like his pages, he'd rip them up. He said that on many occasions, right? Or if he didn't like a panel or whatever, he would start right over from scratch. And you can actually see that in the staging of his work. But I think once he started, he didn't really fuss about if a line was kind of wrong or scratchy or things along those lines. I think it was much more about, did it convey the message he wanted to convey? And I think he does it splendidly in the story.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's he's able to retain that energy that so often gets lost between stages. But yeah, I want to comment on like this looks like something out of like his 1950s romance comics. This page in particular. He was tasked with doing a superhero story, but yeah, he spent most of the 50s in doing romance stories, or at least part of the 50s.
Yeah, in the 50s, I mean, he was doing all this stuff for Standard Comics, which was a lot of genre comics, really, but romance was one of them. And he mentions actually in his book, in the Alex Toth Doodle book, that he tied himself up in knots doing the romance stuff, that most of the other stuff for him kind of came easy, or, there was a lot of reference and things to pull from in his own experiences and just life at the time, that it was easy enough to do that. But when romance came into play, that's where it was really difficult, because it was more about human expression and moving things along through talking head panels, where a lot of superhero stuff, you have a lot of bombastic, crazy things that, cloud the panels and whatever, and move things along in that regard. With romance comics, you just have these characters sharing this space and this energy in this moment. And it can be really hard to convey everything that you want to convey and still make it interesting and fun and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a very angles and shot lengths and everything just to keep it moving.
Yeah, I wanted to comment that in this book, they take an excerpt of a letter he sent somebody. He sent a lot of letters in his day, which where he was imparting a lot of wisdom and a lot of his philosophy on comics. And I got a tremendous amount of value reading this section in particular. You said he tied himself up in knots. In this section, he basically says that he's talking about his romance stuff in the 50s, and he discovered that he wasn't satisfied with how he was drawing girls. He wanted to improve that, so he looked at, he said, I looked at a lot of boy-girl art in women's magazines with new eyes and came to fully appreciate the lovely, sensitive works of our great illustrators. I set about to be more amenable an audience for the dreaded women's movies of the day, seeking them out so that I could see the how, why, and wherefore of responses of Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, Barbara Stanwyck, et cetera, et cetera. He was analyzing, their movements and the acting specifically of these women actors, these actresses, and trying to apply that into his work. And that's something I found valuable is like when you're an artist, especially when you're a comic artist, you need to start seeing the world differently than everybody else. You need to analyze everything in front of you from a visual standpoint. How people move, is that an interesting door? Just like everything, because all of that is going to help your artwork. And I think it shows here. Like, this is some great bit of feminine acting.
Yeah. Yeah. The way she kind of prances
Absolutely.
out and is tossing the wig on and kind of I love the bottom row second panel on the right hand page. It's like she's kind of like jumping into her tights rather than slipping into them.
Yeah, and I like this little detail about where the hands are.
Yeah,
as
like she's
moving.
like, no, it's not pulled up enough. I don't have enough give.
And that's the thing that's interesting with Alex is that a lot of people, especially more superhero purist artists, tend to not really like his work all that much because it isn't necessarily as dynamic, but the body language of all his figures is so natural looking. And I think I remember reading something along the lines of Bruce Timm talking about that because they originally wanted Alex on the animated series, Batman the Animated Series.
Wow.
And I think it didn't work out because there was probably quite a few things that ended up being a barrier to that all. But they were saying when they were trying to kind of make the figures more Toth-like, it became incredibly hard because even though his figures are simplistic, they are so well structured that it was hard to do the squash and stretch that was required of the animators and the breaking down. It's funny. It's like he worked for Hanna-Barbera for years and he did these figures, but these Hanna-Barbera artists very clearly just could not translate his works fully. And when you see his model sheets and then you see what ends up being produced, there definitely is like, it's not a vast chasm, but there's definitely a major difference in what Alex envisioned and what ended up being animated. And I think when they were looking at the Batman animated series as well, that was one of the things too, is like Bruce Timm had kind of remarked that his anatomy was so structurally sound and his body language was so good that it was very hard for other artists to translate. They just couldn't quite do it the way he did. And so it would get lost in translation, which is kind of really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, how about the sound effects here in this panel?
Oh, I mean, that's great. Just the the motorcycle. I was trying to draw one at the Comic-Con we were at a couple of weeks ago, and I remember saying, "Why did I try to draw this?" And Eric said, "Oh, they're a nightmare. You can't." And then here's Alex Toth just rocking it, no
And
problem.
choosing a very unconventional angle too.
Yeah, man. He's got he doesn't have anything to. What is he? There's no model for him to angle up and look at the underside.
Well, he might have had like a miniature model.
Yeah, he might have had toy motorcycles or something. He could look at, like those Hot Wheel ones.
No, fair, yeah, but still, so impressive.
I think at this point he was so well established, and he had drawn that stuff so much. Like, this is mid 60s. This book, is it, or is it in the 70s?
It's like 72,
72, right? Yeah. So at that point, he had already been drawing for 20 years, and I know he was really critical of a lot of artists. He would call them Polaroid artists. I remember he talked about Doug Wildley, who also worked for Hanna-Barbera. He referred to him as a Polaroid artist rather scathingly.
Yeah.
But the reality is that all these artists use reference. They like to pretend that they have a photographic memory, but that's not the truth. And even if they did have a photographic memory, you usually still have to draw from photos, from models, from figures, if you want things to look accurate and right. I think that's just the reality of things. But I think where Alex is really unique is he wasn't a slave to that. And, you know, another artist that I really, really love is Frank Thorne. And he talked about that. And he said, the only way that you can truly have command of the full page is to not be a slave to photographs. Because the moment you are, then you're framing your entire page, you're framing your entire sequence around these kind of this static imagery, right? And that's always something that I think people kind of, when they lose the plot a little bit with that stuff, and they rely too much on the photos, or they are too insecure about their own skills to try and make it happen. But the reality is, in comics, is that we have to just go. We have to just do, and we have to just try and get things done. Exactly. We just have to get things done within a certain amount of time. So there's always going to be a certain level of cheating. There's always going to be a certain level of unhappiness with your own work. There's always going to be a certain level of whatever to push it through to the finish line. I think that's something that most people tend to forget when they're thinking about comics, right? They try and hold it to this impossible standard. And then they always cite the worst stuff as being like the worst examples of comics. But the reality is that it's a hard job. And you have to learn to draw anything and everything.
That's a very good observation about the use of pictures, and that framing it through still images, because it's easy to think of a comic as it's a series of still images, but it's not. It's a series of images that are trying to convey motion.
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect example of that here.
Yeah, and and thinking about it in terms of static images is very limiting. So all you young artists out there, keep that in mind.
The key is to not become a slave to your reference. It's an aid, not a crutch.
Jesus knows I've done that. Trying to break out.
I think we all have, right?
Yeah, I definitely degree. Early on.
And I mean, even some days I still do, because, you know, you get approached with having to draw something that you've never drawn before, considered drawing before. And what are you supposed to do? You really have to then just kind of sit down, look at the reference, dissect the reference, figure out how to draw it from multiple angles. And that shorthand does get better over time, but it is still a struggle. And I mean, the thing is if you're not struggling as a comic book artist, then what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe any of us are that good that we can just close our eyes and whip up a page and it be masterful.
No.
I think there should be blood, sweat, and tears on every page. Every page should be a marathon, if it's worth its salt.
And Alex Toth was very tortured himself, even though he makes it look easy. Like, I don't know what it is, but this inspires me to draw, and it looks like attainable, but it is a lot more difficult than it looks. And yeah, he was incredibly tortured and held himself up to a very high standard.
But they said he's a controversial figure too, but I think he just didn't have time for people's shit. Like he's very quick to throw up his hands and be like, fuck you, you know? So.
Well, yeah, I think there was some undiagnosed something to do with him.
Really?
Who knows? Yeah. I mean, going back to, the old back 50s, 60s, they just didn't talk about stuff like that, right?
Oh yeah, you were either
mental health
or totally fine. Yeah. One of the two, nothing in between.
I think he considered his comic work and the medium itself and the craft of it, he took it all extremely seriously. And sometimes that doesn't leave room for funny business. It doesn't leave room for all of that other stuff. Not that he couldn't laugh at himself or have fun with his work or do things. I just think that he held himself up to an impossibly high standard, and he did other comic artists as well. So when people see like his review of Steve Rude's work or, other guys like Paul Pope and stuff like that, they think he's being scathing, biting, that he is kind of mean-spirited. But I think really when he looks at something, and especially when, he's covered so many different genres and done so many different books in his life. This guy's drawn literally like thousands upon thousands upon thousands of drawings, right? He's going to really start to criticize stuff that feels half-assed or hack work, right?
Would you consider it a criticism or a critique? Because he did go to a design school. I wonder if he's like, well, other artists point out the problems with other artists, so you get better.
I think that's really what it is. It's more critique.
Like I'm doing you a favor here.
Yeah. And everybody gets a certain something out of relationships. And he had a lot of different kind of relationships, letter writing relationships and other relationships with his peers and stuff like that. I think he only kept in them for as long as they were valuable to him. And then once it just didn't or, he felt all he said he could say all he could say, or he did all he could do, he just moved on from it. And I think a lot of people were hurt by that, but that's just the reality of life sometimes.
Well, and it's all incredibly complicated too, because there were always like perceived slights. Like there's just stories of like there was accidentally like change left in some mail, and by somebody sending something to Toth, and Toth opens up, sees change in there, and he's like, "Oh, you think I'm poor or something? You think I need a handout?" Like, and then cuts off that friendship completely.
I heard about that story.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people in his life experienced a lot of that, and again, there's like theories out there that there was some sort of undiagnosed something or other. But yeah, I mean, he's very tortured in general. Something I want to comment here about this panel is that it's an extremely small panel, and we have dialogue saying, I've been in nicer neighborhoods. We don't need that dialogue because he's just put so much visual information in there. You've got the cracked windows, you've got like overflowing garbage, a for rent sign, and yeah, he's just communicating a lot in that small panel.
Yeah, he's really capturing that the urban decay of New York in the 70s, because this is around the time it starts heading down. And I know this is like Star City or whatever they set it in, but like they're all in New York too. And that's what he's really capturing, like I love the way he did the fire escape, just bolted onto the front, just hanging off as this skeleton kind of dangling from its own building.
And then there's graffiti there.
Yeah, and the trash piles, like it's just piled up, like the sanitation guys are on strike.
I think that's one thing that, a lot of people, when they cite Alex's work, they tend to refer to it as simplistic. And yes, there is a reductionist quality to his work. There is a minimalist quality to his work. But I've never seen a comic artist fill up a panel like he does. There's so much information there. And yeah, there might not be
a lived-in environment here.
Yeah, exactly. There might not be 1,000 little render lines, kind of trying to form an object or whatever. But all the information you need is there. Everything that you need to understand is there. And that's, I think, where he is incredibly strong. And where you do see a lot of stuff in modern comics too, is that oftentimes, and this happens to be just because there's multiple people working on the book, and there isn't necessarily always that level of, having full control and creativity of things. But especially in the age of digital lettering, you can see that lettering is more of an afterthought applied to the art on top. Where
and it looks like a layer stacked onto art with a different. It doesn't look integrated.
No, it doesn't. And oftentimes you have this huge panel, landscape panel, and you have a speech balloon that's this small. And you wonder, well, could that speech balloon, you don't want to cover up a lot of the great art, obviously, but could that speech balloon have been a little bit bigger, a little bit more dynamic to kind of capture the action and the pacing of the panel? And I think these two pages in particular illustrate just why lettering is so important and why people tend to overlook that in comics. Now, if for the audience that doesn't know, Alex does letter all his own work. And you can really see it just come through in all of the panels, not only from the sound effects, the automatopoeia, all of that jazz, but just his speech bubbles and the way he breaks up the dialogue to make it interactive for the reader.
Yeah, how all of this is broken up.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates sort of a pause between, and it creates a rhythm, a very specific rhythm that he's going for. But I mean, and all this stuff, it like this helps with the motion. As he's moving down.
And I love beside it leads into it too. So you get so she's going to reach under.
I guess he's like guiding you throughout the page.
And then the stars floating around him on the bottom.
Cartoon language there.
Yeah, lying at her feet, just like, what?
You gotta love how the heels are integrated into the fight.
Yeah.
Like his pants are being ripped. So, I mean, I guess he's putting a lot of thought. Like if she's wearing heels, she's going to integrate that into the fight somehow, right? And then, the pants are ripped all throughout.
For this fight scene, I love how he picks and chooses the actual the figures, the size of the figures to emphasize, and how she kind of ramps up. She jumps up, her knees come up in panel two, as in the second figure shot, and then just the direct line down to her heels on his toes. It's like such a static kind of like standing up motion, but he captures it perfectly. Just the two mid motions, the two motions that he chooses to draw
these two
in that
perfect.
Entire action. Yeah.
I mean, this is like the most memorable Toth page. This has to be one of the most memorable Toth pages around, right?
I think for superhero fans, absolutely. It's just definitely one that like I often see get retweeted and shared on socials a lot. And actually, Eric, you pointed out one of the things that I think really makes this page different than if other artists were to have done this page, was the heels ripping into the pant legs. It's such a creative thing that only Alex would think of. And if you were to give this page to 100 different artists, I don't think any of them would have thought to do that.
Yeah.
And maybe it was in Denny O'Neill's script, right? It was Denny O'Neill who wrote this one. It might have been in Denny's script, but something tells me it wasn't. It was probably, here's an action scene. Black Canary kicks this guy's ass or whatever.
Yeah.
But that is something where you really see like his uniqueness shine through in the pages. It's not just the sound effects. It's not just the, dynamic and fun cartoony figures. A lot of it just goes into how he thinks about every aspect of the space on the page. It's just absolutely profound in some aspects. I know that sounds a little, but truly, when you start looking at his work in depth, you really start to see like, this guy's not like everybody else.
Yeah, even the lights out stars in the bottom corner are like perfectly laid over that figure when he's flat out on the floor.
Well, exactly. They go with the perspective of the figure rather than the viewer, right? Which is such a fun, interesting way to approach that. I just don't think you'd see a lot of artists think about doing that in the same way.
Yeah, it's a very, very cool page that you've seen homaged often. So, another thing I want to comment on, like, he's very well known for his character design, specifically in an animation. But, like, looking at this guy, looking at her, and then looking at all these women here, everybody's got a unique and different face or hairstyle, something that makes them stand out.
Yeah, I love the design of Bertha Kane from top to bottom. It's so weird, but you know so much about her all of the sudden just from seeing like the weird hair and the big glasses and the drapery and chains. Like she stuck up a Flava Flav to take his.
Now these characters end up being revealed to be villains, I guess, and Alex Toth worked on Saturday morning cartoons doing character designs, and like there is a sort of like Disney thing where the villainous characters have to look villainous. Do you think that was a consideration when designing all of these women?
I mean, it's got to be, right? Unless he doesn't know.
I'd say, well, they have to. You don't know that they're villains at first, right? So they just look like four very unique, different.
Yeah, and that might be part of it, is just making them all unique. But I mean, does that look like a villain character?
This is also a story written during being published at the height of the women's liberation movement, which is what they're playing on. And there is, I don't know if it's right, like it's Take Back the Night stuff. It's and there is a focus on women learning self-defense at the time, which it really seems like not a lot of people took very well. And like
that was something I thought about, which is just like, is this his conception of what a feminist looks like?
Yeah, like that's kind of what it came off to as me. But the only reason I say that is because I know there were other attempts to use the women's liberation movement as plot points. The Lady Liberators in Marvel, for one,
right? Yeah,
and they are not flattering portrayals.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that what, especially if you look at this page and kind of how he set everything up, it really does look like that they are kind of just this casual group that meets and does their judo practice together. But you can kind of tell just by the staging of it that there's something a little off kilter here.
Your body language.
There's probably something more than meets the eye. And yeah, it's kind of interesting when I see these figures that he does. It does remind me a lot of his like alla prima drawings that he does. As I mentioned in this doodle book, you really get to see a lot I don't know if the camera can pick this up here, but you really do get to see like a lot of how he tackles expressions and things along those lines.
Yeah.
And they are,
he's choosing like face shapes and head shapes and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that is reflective in the book too. Obviously, there might be some deeper, knowing how much he thinks about the work that he's doing. He's probably thinking about everything at the time and possibly what was happening in pop culture, especially with a lot of the women's lib stuff. It's a popular topic, and you can kind of see how they integrated that into the modern Wonder Woman of the 70s, the new Wonder Woman, and things along those lines, and even this Black Canary story. So I think it's really, really fascinating. And one thing that these comics are fantastic for is taking you back to a time and a place and a space, right, where this stuff, where the clothing was a certain way, there was a certain kind of attitude, and what was happening in the cultural zeitgeist at the time, and just people's general approach to that, I think, is reflective in all the works of that era, obviously, but it is kind of cool seeing it through his lens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he was a very research intensive guy, so this gives me the impression that he was looking at, like, I don't know, judo manuals,
probably,
or something,
or magazines, something along those lines, I'm guessing.
Yeah, like, this has a sort of I don't know, graphic manual kind of quality to it, and
yes,
it's very effective,
sort of thing.
Yeah,
and
what do you think of the staging of this panel?
Those hips don't lie, is what I think.
Yeah.
No, it's a really great shot.
I love it how it's I think most artists would have the entire figure there, would at least show her face, but I mean, this just reads to me like building atmosphere,
and sets up the confined space that she's going to be in. Like, you already know whatever happens down here, there's not much space for her to move, right? But he's also set up her self-defense abilities also don't really require there's not a lot of jump kicks or anything like that. It's very close quarter stuff, but this is even smaller than we've seen previously. So I think it gives you this kind of claustrophobic look of whatever is about to happen is just kind of been dialed up in its danger.
Well, yeah, there's a foreboding element to it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just actually, Eric, go back to that last panel you mentioned real quick. I do feel like, just kind of ruminating a little bit on this and just observing it. I think one thing that it really does go to show is like how structurally sound Alex's work was, not just beyond figure work, right? Like, most of this panel is black, is spotted black.
Yeah, what percentage would you say is black? It's like at least 25% black. 50, you think?
It feels even more so. Like when you look at the staircase, and it's like, what is he actually revealing here? He's revealing the lights, the ductwork, the wood structuring, the brick, and obviously the staircase. But there's only the information you really need, and you get the sense that she's going down to some place that's a little bit creepy, a little bit foreboding. You don't really know, she doesn't really know what's going to happen around the corner. It seems like a casual encounter, but there's something else happening here. And that's the thing, is you don't even need to read. You can tell automatically from just the last 3 panels there how he decides to pace that and convey that, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, it's very well done. Yeah, and then this is where the twist happens, I guess. So this right here is interesting, this vertical panel and here, because again, going back to this book, the same excerpt. So this is from the Genius Isolated book, but I got I did get a lot out of this one excerpt, going back to this page. And in it, he talks about how, I think you alluded to this earlier, Nickolej, which is that superhero comics that he was doing in the early 50s were 6 panels. But when he came on to romance, they tended to be like 9 panels. And there was just a lot of dialogue and a lot of captions. And so he was trying to find a way to make the page look appealing with all that information. And part of that is that he would isolate a lot of the captions and then create these sort of motifs and symbols to unite what was being talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that you get to see a bit of that in this Black Canary piece.
That's something that you don't see in modern comics at all, really, anymore.
No, not unless they're doing like a throwback to, like, we've time traveled to the 50s.
Yeah, so he says here, my first decision re space, layout, dialogue, and caption copy was to experimentally give all the captions their own little vertical panels to keep caps away from the already top-heavy dialogue crowding every panel. Mm-hmm. And then I had to warm up those sterile cap panels with bits of artwork that either loosely or specifically connected with the continuity dramatics of the preceding and following panels. So all sorts of little symbols and motifs emerged out of necessity.
Yeah,
and that's where you get like this.
Especially considering his kind of more graphic design approach to pages, right? He's thinking about the entire page and how the reader is going to see that. And I struggle with that a lot too, where if the panels are really dialogue heavy, you're squishing out the art in a lot of weird ways. And sometimes in order to make that work or make that feel organic, usually you have to break the panel borders, or move it over kind of like he did and have it in its own separate distinct panel and maybe having little illustrations to anchor it all together. That is a tough thing that I constantly am wrestling with, because it can so easily get very, very heavy. And I remember looking at some of Milton Caniff's Steve Canyon work, and it was just incredible. Every panel was so dense and there was so much amazing stuff. But I remember showing one of my friends, and he said, and his first reaction was to it, I think this guy's art is great, but I hate the way that this is laid out. He's like, it's so balloon heavy. It's frustrating me as a reader. And so I think there is a little bit to that where everybody has their own preference of what they like. But I think Alex was masterful at playing with the space and using really creative balloon design to kind of tackle that, like we were saying earlier, how he broke sections up, right? Just to kind of go beat by beat instead of just giving you a big balloon filled with words. You know what I mean? That is hard to read and detracts from the actual art.
Oh, and his lettering is so fun to look at too. I can't think of anybody who letters as whose lettering is as appealing to me as his hand lettering.
Yeah, and it also allows him to work with the acting that he was mentioning in the letter that you found. When he breaks stuff up, he's able to, like, well, if she's posed this way, how is she going to deliver dialogue? So he can pace it out in concert with the acting, the physical acting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, so anything else you guys want to say about these pages before we move on to the next one?
Just the transition from right to left, that you get the completed, that he does the completed over her shoulder flip, and then the impact of it, and the way the guy who's getting hit by the other guy, just like he shorts out almost, like his arms go completely backwards straight and collapses from being hit with another man. Just like so fun. What a bizarre way to pose a person, but also it really communicates. Oh, they're both out. They're both done.
Mm. I love the way the eye's directed in the last page there. Like if you could just, it's kind of like a sway down, especially if you follow her hair. It leads off quite well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to mention, Taylor, you had spoken earlier about kind of the claustrophobia in the panels. And I think the page on the right is a fantastic example of having to fit a lot of figures, a lot of information in all at once, and doing it in such a way. I feel like most artists, especially if they were drawing ensemble teams, things along those lines, would have the camera pulled back a lot so you could get everybody in the scene type of thing. But he very cleverly uses worm's eye view in the panel where you can see her face and then the whole crew kind of standing over her. And then on the bottom
panel, just extreme close up.
Yeah, in the bottom panel that Colin mentioned, you kind of get more of a bird's eye, and it was a really astute observation just looking at how the hair flows and moves. It really guides the eye in such a way. And that is the thing, I think, when I first started getting into Alex's work that really turned me on, because I had never really seen people approach panels like that. And that was going back to what we were saying about filling the panel with as much information as possible. It might be simple, but there is a lot to look at and there is a lot to consider in every single panel. And I think he does that extremely well. And this is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the rest of this looks like another 1950s story. I can always tell because if there's no artist or writer credit, it was probably a reprint of a 50s story, or maybe a 40s story.
Res opening panel too, like, oh, we'll get to it later ago.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to part 2. So yeah, another. This is Tony DeZanuga inked by Bob Oskner.
That's cool. Tony's still an incredibly underrated artist.
Yeah, probably another Bob Oskner. You're a big fan of Tony DeZanuga?
He's another artist that I probably maybe only in the last like 7-8 years I've really become more in tune with. But I started reading a lot of his stuff. I believe he did some of the Sinister House and, of course, a lot of the DC horror stuff, just basically coming out of that era Tony was working on. He was really, really ahead of his time. And it's a shame because, he's kind of an artist like Alex, where they talk about, here's a master, but doesn't have a masterpiece, right? They've done.
Did you ever look at any of the Savage Sword of Kona and stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My stepfather, sad story. He left our family at one point, and but when he left his comic trunk, and in his comic trunk was filled with Savage Sword of Conan and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and just a bunch of obscure Marvel stuff, around the Epic era or whatever, just like weird stuff that he was collecting at the time. And that actually ended up being a huge inspiration for me looking at those books. When I was a kid, I didn't appreciate them all that much. But as an adult, I started to really relish in those books. I love the gray washed tones and the energy and the feeling of those. Especially anything of that era, that magazine format is my bag. I love stuff like that. The creepy and eerie is a good example of great magazine format stuff where they use.
This is a nice magazine format book.
Yeah, that's probably, if we were to talk about Alex's masterwork, it would probably be his Bravo for Adventure. And the reason why I say that is it's his most personal work. And I think, you can say whatever you want. I think every Toth fan has their favorite story, their favorite thing that inspires them, that he does, their favorite drawing of his. But the reality is that if we were to tie something so closely to the man that is representative of him, his writing style, his art style, it would be Bravo.
Right on.
Yeah,
which
agreed.
we will definitely have to cover in a future episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, for now we have part 2, and how about this very graphic kind of? This is like a takeoff Polaroids, maybe or maybe not. I don't know. What do you think?
I was thinking that actually, Polaroids or snapshots, photographs, something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because but it's also the very graphic language of the panel borders. Like it's the space, it's gutter space around it, and they go in and out. Yeah, it's very.
I do like her hand coming out of one of the panel borders, though.
Yeah, and the hair and everything.
Nice,
it's very.
It's a good decision.
It's just very graphically appealing, I think, more than anything. But who knows?
And it's just things he always do. He just kind of play with space, break it. He's very creative in that way. And it's not that other comic artists weren't doing similar stuff to that. It's just that it's so heavy-handed in all of his work. There's just an immense graphic design angle with everything.
Well, and that's what gets me is like this stuff is great. I have no critiques pretty much. Like this is a spot on Illustrator, but it does look like your typical 1970s comic. Whereas this, like, again, I think I said this before, but it just does not look typical in any way, and it almost feels timeless in the way that a lot of those other comics didn't.
I just want to talk about the turnaround that he does here in these 2 pages, because like the top panel on the left or the right-hand page that's cut into 3 is like on its own, it's great, but when it's taken with the bottom 2 panels of the other page, it's a great, like, just so you know where we are in space, I've rotated you around. I've shown you she's inside. Here are the van windows. So now you're oriented so that when he comes back into it and it's facing the exact opposite direction that it was in the first panel on the bottom of the left, you're not confused about like, wait, where are we now? What happened? It's a complete turnaround.
It's a good point you brought up, though, Taylor, with the van too. The first page, like, it's all the rear of the van, like the back door is opening up, and also as it's turning the corner, you only see the back doors of the van as it's turning the corner. And that last panel on the page on the left, though, like, that's ooh.
Yeah, because I remember thinking, oh, he's broken the 180 rule, but in a way that is really well done, so that you're not confused.
I think so, and it's a shame because these reprint or just these, not reprints, but the original comic prints definitely wash, especially with the color, wash out a lot of the detail on this page. I have this page in, I don't own the original, but I have like a printout of this page in black and white. And it's really stunning, especially that last panel that you're referring to, because there, unfortunately, a lot of detail kind of gets washed out with the color. But I remember seeing that and thinking, wow, he conveyed that so well. And you're right, there is a little breaking of the rules, but he establishes it pretty much early on in the page, enough so that it's easy for the reader to understand that when he goes to that last panel, you're not kind of like, okay, what's actually going on here? You realize that she's in the back of the van. You realize that they're going to be towing her away here in a moment, right? And I think that's kind of the crux, or one of the most challenging things about being a comic artist, is what people don't realize is when they think of storytelling, they tend to think of it in a beat for beat kind of thing. But oftentimes, especially with comics, you have a limited amount of space and pages that you can convey all of the information that you need to convey. So oftentimes you do get these kind of like, there's a lot of complexity in the panels. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of figures. There's a lot of overlap. But it's done so in a way to make sure that the reader understands exactly what's happening, so that they're not confused. They're not flipping back pages or going forward to try and see if they missed something. And I think that's when a lot of people talk about Alex. When they see modern comic work, right, and they see a lot of these great comic artists of today, they've learned so much from all of these fantastic teachers, right? All the people who are fans of Bruce Timm and Darwin Cook, they've basically probably poured over their works in excruciating detail to kind of make these pages what they want them to be. But the reality is that every artist ends up having to pull from something else, and I think a lot of these artists don't necessarily realize how much Alex has influenced the comic game. You know, he might not necessarily have the quote unquote masterwork or that popular piece that everyone knows. You know, like I think of Batman Year One is a great example, and David's work on that is absolutely amazing. But he's like now forever in the history and annals of time because of that work that he did, because it was attached to Batman of all things, right?
Right.
But if it wasn't, people still look at it in the same way and hold it up to the same standards. And I think a lot of that stuff gets overlooked because it's not popular. It's not necessarily doing something with a super popular character. And this is kind of unique work because it is popular work. It is superhero work. It is that stuff that everybody can attach themselves to. But I think we have like generations upon generations upon generations now that have been influenced by their peers or current artists that they're seeing, not realizing where the stuff came from, you know? And so to them, they might look at this and not think it looks special because it's been iterated on 1,000 times now. But when you actually see like nobody was doing this at the time, then you really start to understand just how special it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
In fact, I think these two issues, just like an off-topic thing, but these two issues in that entire series are probably, like, in terms of back issue, like hunting and stuff, these are the most sought after. In fact, they're the most. I mean, the cost or the price of them are probably the most on eBay right now. If you go on eBay auctions, these are probably pretty pricey. But the entire run is just, I don't want to say forgettable, but it's not. You know, it's got a lot of great artists that worked on this series, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. This is a hidden gem. This is great. Like, I would never have thought to look in the 418th issue of
exactly
for Alex Toth just giving you a clinic on how to tell a story. Like, you can learn so much from just these stories.
So, what percentage of Black do you think these two pages take up?
Man, like 80%. It's so much.
I wouldn't say 80%.
Maybe not 80.
But it's a lot. It's
less than 50. It's a lot. Yeah.
Which, like, I grew up on 90s comics where, like, you know, the amount of lines on a face are what makes a popular comic, right? And that's our conception of detail, is like, look at the amount of lines are on that face. And I don't know, because I grew up on stuff like that, I see a lot of, I don't know if bravery is the right word, but maybe it just takes a lot of guts to put this much Black on a page, I think. And also to put this much black and make it work.
And self-control, like to not overdo it either way as well, right? It's the same. It's the correct amount of black. It's not he went too heavy with them or was too afraid to put it on. It was like, no, this is what you should be seeing. I often fall into like, oh, I put way too much blacks down.
Oh yeah.
At this time too, he was from what I understood is that he was basically spotting blacks as he went too, where most artists would draw the line work first and then do the spotting of the blacks. He would basically draw it all out, start inking it, and if he felt like he wanted to fill in the blacks, he would. And what's cool about these pages is when you do see them, I think he was using a Pilot fine liner at the time. He talks about it quite a bit in his doodle book as being one of his favorite tools of the trade because it's cheap. The tip on it is kind of hard and soft at the same time, so it allows for a lot of expression. But you can actually see the ink itself has faded over time because it wasn't as
that makes black. The original art pretty interesting.
Yeah, so you can actually
see archival ink mixed with non-archival ink.
Absolutely. And you can really see like some of the inks have faded into purples and oranges and lighter gray tones and browns, like sepia kind of things. And it is kind of really interesting when you look at that because you can then see where he actually spots his blacks or he fills it in with like permanent marker or something along those lines. And yeah, he kind of, especially with a lot of his line work, he will go as far as he feels he needs to with that to kind of fill in the detail. Maybe some of it is the fact that he is working under such a tight and excruciating deadline that he's just trying to fill in as quickly as he can. And sometimes maybe he overdoes it. And I think he's even talked about that. And he's the first critic in his work where he really says like, you know, I probably could have done this better. I could have done that better. Too much. The information's now lost, right? I think in like this last panel here on the far right page, that's a panel, especially once you add color and stuff like that, where I do think the information does get a bit lost, and you're kind of have to like really squint and see what am I looking at type of thing. Could it have been done better? Probably. And if you were to ask Alex, he'd probably say that too. But you know, that's just the way it goes when you're a comic artist, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that's coming up in our work. The stuff that we're looking at is a lot of guys just being like, yeah, I'd love to spend more time, but also I have a life outside of this and I gotta go. I gotta make sure my kids see my face and my wife doesn't hate me.
I was also gonna mention, Eric, that the top three panels on the right page there, as they're divided up, it's one panel, but it's divided up. That actually reminds me a lot of the kind of interesting, playful panel work that you were doing on Assorted Crisis events.
Oh, Thank you. Yeah. Actually, I did want to comment on this because he could have done this as one complete panel, but he very deliberately broke it up into three because he wanted to create beats and create a rhythm between the three.
Yeah, it's pulling back to reveal her almost.
Yeah, it's starting with her hair, which is such a defining quality.
The van window. In the van window, so you know where you are, and then it pulls back to reveal more.
Yeah, it's just something that kind of was reminiscent of the storytelling that you've been doing lately and how you take something and want to convey something and break it up in really creative ways. I think there needs to be more of that in comics. And it's not to say that there isn't, but it does feel like it's more few and far between these days. And it would be nice to see people take more risks like that in their books.
Yeah. You know? I mean, the whole point behind Assorted Crisis events is playing with the medium, stretching it and bending it and trying not to break it. But just being
Assorted Crisis events on sale now.
Yeah. Ongoing series from Image drawn by yours truly. Yeah. Thanks for the plug, guys.
And it also reminds me of the work that you did for Heart Attack, now a TV show in Japan. The full compendium is also available, and the use of space and time that you employ there is also very reminiscent of this, and is further iterated in A Certain Price is Fence.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I want to get this in.
Yeah,
I want to get this in
panel, right?
Since
you're all about this panel, right, Colin?
Yes. But you know what? Okay, so you can talk about the art in this panel. Then I'll let you have that. But the dialogue is actually really, really well done. Denny O'Neil, the writer, props to him, because this is a really great line, and I love it, like, what's it called? Universal truths. And this line, beautiful bird lady, if you must ever give up, do it 10 minutes after you've drawn your last breath and not a second before, excuse me. Great line.
Is Green Arrow in his like socialist revolutionary period at this point, or is this just like happy-go-lucky Robin Hood figure version?
Yeah, I'm not too up on my my Green Arrow history. I feel like that
she calls him Rebel Riding Robin Hood. So, excuse me, she calls him Rebel Riding Robin Hood. So,
yeah, but no allusion to him being like a liberal, like I think that came out, and Denny O'Neil, it was the Denny O'Neil run with Neil Adams, right? Which was probably I don't know, a couple years after this, or I'm not sure.
I think it was
audience to chime in.
69.
Oh, well, then it was before. It was before. So that's interesting. So this is maybe it's hard to say whether or not it's the more mature version of it, but I do think it really illustrates well just their relationship together. He has one panel to convey that, right?
Yeah.
He has one panel to tell or kind of show what their relationship was like, and I think that's just a little sweet vignette there.
It is, yeah. And her remembering, like, no, this is how I get out of here.
Look at the smile on her face as she thinks about him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
Love
great.
The rub.
Yeah,
but also the inclination to completely black out the guns is I probably definitely wouldn't have done that. I would have, out of some artistic insecurity, I'd put like little detail, like a rim light on all the guns, just to like prove to the world that I can draw a gun. I swear.
Yeah. I drew a gun under here. I promise, guys. You can see
but it's not, and that's the thing, is it's not necessary. Like it looks graphically very appealing. We know what those are. Those are clearly guns. And there's some lessons to be learned there, I suppose.
And I think it's kind of interesting too, because the perspective is kind of broken in a lot of ways, and these gun sizes are not necessarily real or accurate. But I do think what it does is that he knows exactly like, where's the space here I can play with. How do I show off these figures in a really creative way? And you can tell there's almost like a spotlight on them or something along those lines, with really like interesting cast shadows and stuff along those lines. And that's where like people talk about his mastery of playing with light and dark. And I think that's a great example of that, where it does, as Eric was saying, it shows that he doesn't really have those insecurities as artists. I know when I'm working on something, I'm always having to prove that I can draw, whether it be to myself or to my audience.
Yeah.
And sometimes it actually hurts my drawings to just, it would be better if I thought of them in a more simplistic form, if I executed them in a more simplistic form. And that's why I've always been extremely jealous of cartoonists that can do that, because they're able to reduce it down to its finest elements. And that's something I strive for every single day when I work.
It also brings up something, Colin, you bring this up a lot, and now you have incepted me to think about it as well, because Nickolej, you're right, the guns don't quite make sense, but Colin often brings up size relationships and just like the overpowering size of these guns. Like, yeah, it doesn't make sense, but it's not supposed to. It's supposed to convey the feel of these are right here. They are seconds away from death, but she's also still alive because this is a memory of hers. So we know that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned earlier, Taylor, was claustrophobia. And like these panels are clearly, the intent was to create claustrophobia because she's constantly being cut off and like zoomed in on like way too much, very deliberately.
Yeah, just like her hair trapping her face, or if you go back one page too, there's a great use of it. Yeah, in the middle row, you can see like the zoom in there. The middle row of the right page, it's the zoom in from there to there. And like her hands are all by themselves.
And like all of this is very deliberate. All of this is like intentional.
But you also have the fishnets to also still keep you oriented. Like even though it's a small space, it's a very distinctive pattern that is unique to her design. And oh, okay, so that's her ass that I'm looking at as she's whittling through these ropes. I know where we are now.
Well, I think that's kind of an interesting way of framing it too, because when you look at that without those fishnets, you might not necessarily know exactly what that curve is or what it's supposed to represent. And so I think he knew when he was going and approaching this panel that he was going to use those fishnets as almost an anchoring point, right? That people would be able to kind of dissect what he is trying to show you here by having that be the predominant visual.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very well done. And we're almost done here as we reach the climax. Yeah, so again, some more like claustrophobia here as we're zooming in a little too close. All very deliberate, very intentional on his part. And then we get some action with a lot of great sound effects thrown in.
Yeah. And even like the seems like the instinct would be, so it's been claustrophobic to this point, and now that she is free, it springs up. But the space she's in is still quite small, so he's keeping the framing still quite tight to keep you in that feel of she has some more movement, but she doesn't have that much farther to go.
And an interesting thing about these two pages in particular, there's 6 panels a page, and they're pretty standard as things go. And he had talked about when he was working on Zorro, that was a huge restriction when he was working on those books, is that they had to essentially be 6 panels a page, roughly. He could get away with some of these landscape panels, but for the most part, that was the rule. And he said it was restrictive at first, but then he started getting better at using that space. And I think this book is probably where he got his sea legs to do a lot of that stuff. And you really see it when you look at that Black Canary. It's just how much he fills up that space, but also gives this sense of urgency. And it's very, very unique.
Yeah, and I love the sound effects is following the trail of these grenades that are being thrown. And again, like this, following the trail of the car. I feel like we don't see a lot of sound effects like that these days.
Yeah, we really should. Yeah, it's
the sound effects and thought balloons are kind of going the way of the dodo. I find they're still there, but
Daniel Warren Johnson and artists of that ilk are still employing them.
I think everybody is, and it's a project to project basis. But just in terms of like, is this in the fashion of the time? I just don't think it is all that much, especially the thought balloon. That is something that's been almost entirely replaced by captions now.
Yeah, that was a dictate from Quesada when he took over Marvel. He made it known, we're not doing thought balloons anymore.
Yeah, and there's a reverence for what Miller did with captions that has basically taken over the entire industry.
Oh yeah.
It's a shame, honestly, because it's not that there's obviously they're super effective and they work incredibly well, but it does kind of lose a layer of fun.
It's very comics
character.
It's a very comics thing.
It gives the page character.
Mm-hmm. It shouldn't disappear. But I was going to say, if there's any new comic artists watching and want to really like understand drawing comics, a lot of editors will tell you that they don't care if you can draw 1,000 panels on a page and do really cool abstract, vignettes to kind of like, everybody wants to be John Williams the third, but they don't necessarily have the storytelling grasp he has. So they do these really elaborate, crazy pages. But when editors really want to see is beat for beat how you can tell a story, they want to see pages like this. These are pages that
and left to right,
absolutely,
yeah, exactly.
Because they want to know that you can follow guidelines, that you're not always trying to break the format just because you can. You can do that, and obviously you should at times. Don't be restrictive with that stuff. But if you're struggling to do pages like this because you're getting bored or you don't feel like you don't have the storytelling chops, that is something that you need to kind of maybe internalize a little bit as an artist, I would think, and then go back and try to do pages like these, because the restrictions will make you a better artist.
Yeah, I always say that like every artist should have a list of priorities, and in the case of like I think for the most part storytelling should be the highest priority, and everybody's different, but when it comes to unique page design, maybe that can be secondary. So if you're trying to do a J.H. Williams sort of creative, crazy sort of groundbreaking panel, as long as your number one priority is telling the story in a clear and concise way, you can then do the creative thing as well. Just making that a secondary priority. And you can apply that to everything, like breaking panel borders. As long as the storytelling is the number one priority and not just breaking panel borders because it looks cool, then you can break panel borders.
Yeah. Got to know the rules before you can break them.
Totally.
But so I like just how much black is on this page, and yet we can still tell like somebody's in the front of the vehicle and we have our mysterious character in the back. And we just have 2 more pages left. What do you guys think of the fact that this was not blacked in?
I really like it. I thought it was not at all. It wasn't at all what I was expecting, but I thought, go forward with that more. I want to see more of this.
Did he color this? Actually, who colored this?
No, he didn't color it, and he constantly gripes and bitches about the coloring in comics at that time, just because people would ignore his notes. He was very meticulous about that. He would basically send in like his pages with basically coloring suggestions in all the margins, and or just on a separate note attached to it. And they would constantly just ignore his suggestions. And he gets really angry about it in this book, in this Dear John book. He talks about that a lot. Where especially like even the eerie, creepy stuff, they would take some of his stuff that was supposed to be white and invert it so it was black, so it looked darker and creepier. And he's like, no, the whole point of it is just so that this wouldn't get lost in this. But they don't necessarily read that, and they don't understand what he was trying to get at. And Eric, if you go back to the last page that we were looking at, and then look at that the 4th panel on the right page there that you were pointing out, where Black Canary is pointing to him, you can see they blacked out her hair where that should be blonde. So you lose a lot of the information he was trying to put in there, right? And maybe that was a stylistic choice. I don't know. because they're trying to convey the silhouette or whatever. But I think that's where the coloring ends up hurting his work a lot of times. And
well, actually,
lost.
maybe I was a little.
I think
isn't that supposed to be Catwoman?
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
It is.
That's supposed to be.
Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, I just know that
in the van.
In general, they miss a lot of his coloring notes, and he talks about that a lot, where they black stuff out or they just miss it on a panel or whatever it may be. This is not just a problem with Alex's work. This was a problem back in the early days in terms of quality control and stuff like that. So that is Catwoman in that panel. Thanks for correcting me. But
you're right. Like the process of coloring was, you would have the color guides created by artists, and then you would have technicians, cut little pieces of paper out and put them on. And sometimes you would get like a disconnect between the technician and the artist. Like, for example, we see all these sort of, when we see the blacks on the page, like this is a bit of the yellow that is cut off. You can see like they trimmed this off and pasted it down. And so you get a bit of the yellow showing up on the black. But but even then, like, I'm sure Alex Toth really disagreed with the color guides as well. So, there's a lot that could go wrong.
There is no colorist listed in any of the credits I can find, which I suspect means just the production department as a whole.
Yeah, they weren't crediting colorists for the longest time, eh?
Yeah, somebody was just told, okay, yeah, I got to color it. Where are the guides? Let's go. I got to turn out 5 of these in a week.
Which is a shame because...
Sorry?
Oh, panel. Yeah, I was just going to say it's a shame because, like, especially in modern day comics, I think colorists not only deserve the credit, but depending on how dense the coloring is or how much work is involved in the coloring, sometimes it takes longer than the drawing. And it's like there should be credit there where credit is due. The colorists are amazing workhorses in the industry.
Yeah, and it comes down to like crediting everybody on the cover and everything. Like we like Jordi Belair is one of the best colorists in the industry, and so she, we gotta get her name on the cover. But I was going to comment on I love the line of action here, where this is like an animation trick where like the bottom half is flat and then you get shape on the top, and it creates a very effective like motion that way. And I also like that her feet aren't touching the ground, and so again, like really selling that motion, finding the exact perfect pausing moment to capture. Like these are all static images that you're trying to sell as moving, as jumping off the page. And so just a little detail like not having her touch the ground really sells that.
Yeah.
Eric, the hair John Paul Leon, it rubbed off on him that picking the exact perfect moment to illustrate on the panel. Like, for example, the Human Target story. If you go back to that episode we did on John Paul Leon, it's in the library. Like jumping off a boat or punching somebody, kicking somebody. He'll pick the perfect wind up moment before the action, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, rest in peace. Definitely. One of the greatest artists.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. Time, man.
Yeah.
Right.
So so basically here's the reveal where turns out Catwoman was behind it all along. And I love how like she's only in the one panel of the entire thing.
Yeah.
Crazy that the story just ends with, oh, it's Batman's girlfriend? Oh, okay, never mind. It's fine, I guess.
Well, and this is kind of what I miss of the early days of comics is, and not saying that that there isn't this stuff, but these almost like little episodic, fun kind of things, throwaway, small, short stories, right? They were, it's like they make you feel full, like when you read great Archie strips, right? It doesn't have to be mind bending. It doesn't have to be the most creatively amazing thing you've ever seen in comics. Sometimes you just want a good, satisfying story that's finished in 17 pages.
Yeah.
And if you look at this, I mean, the premise is kind of really funny. Her going into this judo academy that's like actually, a front for bad guys. And like, it's like, I don't know what Denny was thinking when he was making the story, but it's obviously really fun. And it really doesn't take itself too seriously. And I love that stuff, man. And I really hope that we do see more of a return of that, more of an anthology-like format with comics too, because not everything needs to be 90-page epics. This is a graphic novel that has to sell. Sometimes we just want easy, digestible stories that you can read in a couple minutes or 15, 20 minutes and enjoy. And as I said, feel satisfied from it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Nick, I 100% agree. Like, I love the anthology format myself. But I don't see it going that way in the future, to be honest. And that's really sad. It kills me to say it, but I'm just being real, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that format myself.
But don't forget, viewers, Sorted Crisis Events is an anthology series. So pick it up now.
Oh man, you're gonna make people sick of my comic before.
Nope. They'll never get sick. They'll see it and they'll be like, no, I want all of it.
Well, and that's a great thing. I mean, we need more of that in modern day. My favorite stuff is usually in anthology format, whether it be Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, Creepy and Eerie, all of that stuff. I just love these kind of short, fun, digestible stories that are really just easy for anybody to get into. And you don't necessarily have to follow along. Oh, did I get issue of this? And it's part of this run now. I got to go track down this issue. It becomes really, really hard as a comic book reader to follow it all. And these types of stories are perfect because you just get everything from start to finish in a really condensed and concise way. It's awesome.
Yeah. So that was that's probably one of the best Alex Toth stories you can get out there, but not the best. We will try to cover in a future episode, like the best works, because he's done a fair amount. Actually, how about this Dick Giordano art? This is really good, and this is like not this. I was talking about typical looking 70s comics, and this doesn't look like your typical 70s comic.
No.
Looks very interesting.
Yeah, this is him coming off of, I want to say this is coming off of him, like, Charlton being bought, and now he's like, well, I guess I'm back to being an artist.
Oh, well, it's really good at it.
Yeah, I think because he felt he had to, like, really bring his A game just to prove editorial didn't cause any backslide in terms of his skills.
That Phantom Stranger stuff really smacks of Ditko to me a bit. I know there's no credits there, but and I know that's not Ditko, but it's definitely that you can see the influence there.
Mm-hmm.
And then
let's see who is claimed to be
the Enchantress.
Carmine Infantino.
Oh, Carmine, and once again,
probably like 1950.
I think this might be. Oh, okay, yeah. Before he goes back to art school. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We got to check out this Schwarzenegger. Look at that.
Right on. That's cool.
In just 7 weeks? Yeah, why not me?
Okay, so how should we do this? Do you have any art to show off, Taylor, or?
I sure do. Yeah, I mean, I'm headed to. Well, I'm getting back into the physical art, getting back to my roots, and trying new stuff. So this is what I came up with.
Oh, it's very pixelated on my end, but okay, it's coming in. There we go.
Yeah. So dynamic looking.
Thank you. I'm trying not to blow out the light here, but yeah, I probably should have chosen a more solid color palette for it, but I don't know. I think it kind of came out in the end. Especially the splatter effects And the hand. I really like this. You ever draw a hand and you're like, God damn, look at this hand. Look at this hand. It's one of the most difficult things to draw. Yeah. It's one of the most human things to draw. God damn, I did that.
Yeah, I mean, hands never stop being hard to draw. It's a weird thing.
Right?
It's a weird thing. And sometimes you, like, things that you were once really adept at drawing become hard again. You know what I mean? It's like you'll have... when I was younger, I never really thought about drawing shoulders or forearms and things along those lines. All of a sudden, that stuff's really challenging for me now that I'm older. I don't know why. You know, it's like I'm maybe thinking about it in different ways than I used to in my youth. But yeah, it's always hard. That stuff. You think it gets easier over time, but it really doesn't.
It's an endless discipline, right? Yeah, forever learning.
Learn more about it.
I wish I could tell these artists that it just gets so easy. You don't even think about it. And that is true. With a lot of things that you do, you'll just get more equipped with and better at and faster at, for sure. But I think that's the great thing about being an artist is there's an endless amount of challenges.
Well, I want to show off some of your current stuff. So,
yeah, this is fantastic, man.
You showed me this a couple of weeks ago at the convention, and yeah, my jaw was on the floor at how beautiful this work is. So, do you want to speak a bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at this.
The Almost Home Free brand that I'm under, I guess you could call it, is kind of all my approaches and ideas with comics. And eventually I'd like to release an anthology series under the same name, Almost Home Free, with just a bunch of my comic ideas and things along those lines. But one comic that I've been working on right now that's really personal to me that I hope to actually launch on a lot of socials, including Reddit as being the primary platform, is this comic Radio Days. And it is, I guess you could say in some aspects is semi-autobiographical, but in a lot of ways it is, it's its own thing. It's inspired a little bit by the film Pump Up the Volume, which is a film starring Christian Slater from the 90s about a teenager who starts a radio show from his home.
Right on.
And so it's kind of aping a little bit on that premise, but kind of taking it a step further and putting it in modern day. So the general premise is that this young woman, Astrid Ames, loses her grandfather, who she was really close with. And she doesn't really have a father figure in her life anymore. And she's just living with her mother. And when her grandfather passes, he leaves all of his stuff. And amongst his stuff is his ham radio equipment. So she starts setting up this ham radio equipment in her basement and decides to talk to the void for fun. She doesn't really have a radio license or anything along those lines, doesn't really know anything about it, but gets completely immersed in it over the summer break before she returns to school, and kind of becomes this radio host. She's not interested in podcasting. It's just more of a thing to kind of her talking to the void as a means of therapy and things along those lines. But what ends up happening is one of the characters I will introduce later will ends up finding out about this and starts sharing it with the school and releasing it in podcast format without her knowledge.
Oh no.
And so what ends up happening is they end up becoming best friends, and it ends up becoming this whole thing. But the idea, much like in Pump Up the Volume, is it's going to be kind of like the blind leading the blind. Should kids be giving other kids advice about important things? And so you'll have a lot of kids phoning in and talking to her about, really things that affect teens in a lot of ways, right? From sexuality to suicidal ideation to anything that you can really put under the umbrella. Also, gender is a big topic as well. And I'd like to maybe include all of those things so kids these days don't feel alone. So in a lot of ways, it's drawing inspiration from the original run of Degrassi, which is
very cool.
very, very kind of a raw nerve show if you ever watch it, but it's still very accessible and something that people can get into. But at the same time, they're not shy about talking about things that teens really struggle with. And that is the one thing that I want to do with this. Where I'm going to go with it and how I'm going to walk that line is going to be obviously a challenge going forward. I'm trying to think of like, how do I want to frame this comic? Do I want to make it all ages? Do I want to make it specifically for teens? I'm leaning in towards all audiences because I think we've all felt this way, shape or form at some point in time. We've all felt alone. We've all felt wanting to, connect with someone. And so this is my hope. My hope with this comic is to give back and hopefully maybe target those individuals and have them find something that they can connect with. I mentioned earlier on the podcast Calvin and Hobbes being a formative comic in my youth. And that still stands strong today. And it's because Bill Watterson was such an incredible poet with his words and what he wanted to share with the world. Yes, at the end of 3 panels, he wanted to deliver a fun, silly joke that made you chuckle. But in between, he was making you think about the world. And that's kind of what I want to do with this.
Very cool. And I mean, just gorgeous work. I can't get over this panel here.
Yeah. Just the use of tones, man. That's rad.
Well, thank you. And each episode itself is going to be based off of a song. And so in some ways it will kind of become like a high fidelity thing, where there's a little bit of a mixtape by the end of it type of thing. But the idea with having a song introduced each one, I don't say the artist, I just mentioned the title of the song. Like, for instance, Too Much on My Mind is a song by the Kinks. And so I want to kind of put those things in there as a way of like, and obviously tying into radio days and the radio format, and music is so integral with all of that stuff. But also maybe they can see what frame of mind I was in when I was working on that strip and what inspired the words behind that strip. And so every episode will have a new song that people can then hunt down. And I won't be very explicit about who that artist is. Sometimes I'll leave little hints here and there, but I'd rather people, open up their Spotify, go climb through their record collection, see if they can maybe find something that's in relation to that, and maybe understand a little bit more of what I was trying to write and express.
Is that a Sloan poster I see?
Yes, and that's the other big thing too, is because because this is somewhat semi-autobiographical. Astrid's experiences are going to be growing up in Calgary, Alberta. So that's a real cool thing. I actually was working on a panel where I have her running through Marlborough Station, things along those lines. But CanCon, I guess you could call it, Canadian content, for me is a big deal, because I think, especially for a lot of Americans, they don't necessarily have exposure to a lot of the great stuff that was happening and is happening in Canada, especially with indie music. That's something that there's very few bands that manage to break over and cross the border and become more popular. But the amount of influential stuff that was being made in Canada, I mean, from the 1960s onward, is just incredible. And so I definitely want to kind of highlight that stuff. Like, are bands like Sloan my favorite band? Not necessarily, but I do think that, I do really love Sloan, but I do think that they have an important place in Canadian history and iconography and things along those lines that should be kind of celebrated. And that's why I put like little things in there. What would Astrid listen to, right?
they'll be playing in here in July.
Yeah, and I've seen them live a few times, and that's one of those bands that just never gets bad. They've just.
I'm looking forward to it. My wife is a huge fan,
as is my wife,
and I've never been to a Sloan show, so this will be my first one. Looking forward to
absolutely. I mean, those guys, they're older now, but they give it their all every time, and that's just kind of what makes it really cool. And that's the thing is, I just want, I want people to not only have especially if you are from Canada, to read this comic and have a familiarity and a grasp on that stuff, but I also want it to be relatable to everybody. And for instance, that panel there about Astrid overthinking things, I think is something that we all tend to do, but don't necessarily know how to articulate. And just the trepidation and anxiety that we all feel every single day. And I just want people to read this and feel maybe not less alone, maybe that they've they can kind of relate in certain ways, or maybe they just laugh at it and chuckle at it and go about their day. And it doesn't necessarily matter, but I do want people to respond to it because I think it's special and I think it has legs.
Very cool. Yeah. So when do you plan to? I guess you don't have a firm date. You're just trying to. I think you told me you're trying to build up.
This is where it's a bit challenging because right now, as I mentioned, I'm an artist with Kingfisher Syndicate, and I'm also just an independent comic artist in general. So I'm taking any job that comes my way just to pay the bills, really. And so what that inevitably does is it diverts time away from the stuff that I want to be doing, which is stuff like Radio Days and my Almost Home Free anthology series. So really it's more about feasibility than anything. I'm looking into grants and things along those lines. And I plan on launching a Patreon alongside this. But right now, Alex Segarra and I are knee deep in Mara Llava with King Syndicate. So that might take priority, especially dependent on our contract schedules. So I might have to delay this for some time. I was originally hoping to launch this pretty much at the start of May, but with all the other stuff that I have going on right now, I feel it would be remiss of me to release it and then have to make people wait longer for follow-ups. I'd rather just be able to release this in episodic format. And my goal is to eventually just be doing this full time until I move on to another project of mine. So if people are watching this and want to support me, feel free to contact me via my website at almosthomefree.com. And you can send me an email and I can give you some specifics of how you can support this project or just me as an artist. And, I can hope to share a lot of my process with this, a lot of my intention with the storytelling and the messaging. And moreover, I just want people to have a space that they can relate to, just as I was saying, like with Calvin and Hobbes, things along those lines. I want people to have more of a takeaway from it than just being a fun, flighty, stupid joke. You know what I mean? There's going to be that, obviously, and I'm going to play around with the format a lot and break rules where I can. But I really want people to respond and remember what it's like to feel like you did when you were 17 years old, which is a crazy ball of emotions and not necessarily sure of what you want in life, but also talking like you know everything about life and all of it. It's
to be young.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's an interesting dichotomy, but there's nothing like it, right? And that's kind of what I wanted to convey. I just want people to see this and respond to it in the way that I hope that they do. You just never know with this stuff, but at the very least, you'll see some nice, pretty pictures.
Very, very cool.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And a good attitude. I like not leaving people hanging, because this already looks like something people are going to be looking forward to on a consistent
Well,
basis, and
social
you
media
don't
is a
want to
harsh
pull a
mistress in that regard too.
yeah
If you put something out there and
you miss
people
one thing.
respond to it and you don't have follow-ups, I mean, people will forget it just as quickly. So I want to make sure that I am giving this the weight and gravitas that it deserves. And I feel like if I were to release it and then I get inundated with other comic book work, then it would be just doing a disservice to the material.
Yeah, you don't want a necropolis to happen. If you've ever checked that out, it's a web comic from Jake Wyatt, who is currently the showrunner for My Adventures with Superman.
Oh, is that right?
And I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, I love this Superman stuff, but also, when are you going to get back to that? His
work is really good, yeah.
And he has said, like, probably not. I'm probably not going to.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that when I got into this whole comic gig, it was predominantly for that. I know there's a lot of great artists out there that their entire goal as an artist is to become a Marvel or DC artist. You know, I've drawn Wolverine since I was 12 years old, and that's what I continue to want to do to the day I die. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's brilliant. That's a fantastic life to live. And it's amazing that we have a bunch of these people being able to carry on the legacy of these fantastic characters. But for me, getting in the comics game, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in drawing other people's characters. I'm not interested in telling other people's stories. I would much rather do something from the heart that means a lot to me, and at the end of the day, I can say is entirely mine.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that completely. Like, I'm living the dream right now with my image book, Assorted Crisis Events, where it's an ongoing. I hope I can be working on this for the next 10 years, because this is like something we own, and it's something I truly believe in. So yeah, I feel that. I feel that completely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's something Eric's been pushing me on. So I'm finally listening to some good advice.
Well, and that's the thing. Most of the comic artists that I have got to talk to, and I'm talking about big professionals in the industry, I won't name names or anything along those lines, but most of the advice that I get from them is pretty universal. They ask me, do I write this stuff? And I respond, yes. Do I draw this stuff? Yes. Do you do all the lettering, coloring, everything along those lines? Yes. And they say, well, why do you need anybody else? And that is that is something that has kind of really resonated with me and made me think about my own process as an artist, right? I would love to work for Marvel and DC. I'd love to maybe, do a one-off story for them.
Oh yeah.
I think that would be fantastic. I would never say no to such an incredible opportunity. But at the end of the day, that's not stuff that is mine. And if I were to introduce any original elements, it would inevitably not be mine either. I would have to give that away. Yeah. And I'm just not into that, to be honest with you. I think too many artists have done that throughout the years of comics and got completely screwed over because of it, and are continuing.
There's such a long history of that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's honestly appalling. And if there's anybody that is listening, that is in the industry, that has fucked over big creatives like that, just shame on you. Just shame. I have no qualms about saying that, because the legacy that these characters have are not because of you. They aren't. And it's because of these creatives that took these challenges, took the chances to try and make something that's incredibly personal to them and bring it to life. And I'm not saying that these people don't have a role in shaping that, all these producers and bigwigs and people trying to get it out to the masses. You all have a fantastic hand in making this stuff more popular and accessible to the masses. But when you walk all over the creators, the people that laid down on the barbed wire, essentially to make the stuff that you're experiencing and loving today without an iota of respect or thought put behind it, it just isn't enough. And putting their credits at the end of a movie or whatever, and then not seeing any monetary residuals or anything back from it is criminal. Is criminal in my opinion.
Yeah. Labor is entitled to all it creates. Right on. Right on.
Yeah. And I know that sounds like really, really standoffish and harsh. But my entire process of being a comic artist and researching this stuff has, that was that famous line, "Comics will break your heart, kid."
Yeah.
It is true in a lot of ways, because unless you have a platform or all the money in the world to make what you want to make, it is extremely, extremely hard to do so. And it's only getting harder with AI art and all of this new kind of approaches to making art. And that's a whole other subject in and of itself. But what I am saying is it's ever more challenging for creatives in this day and age to make waves without having without having all the resources and all the money in the world. And that is a big shame when it comes to great independent comics. And I hope we see a new renaissance of indie comics, because indie comics are always being released and there's always fantastic stuff. But we need something like we had in the 80s, where all of a sudden indie comics were being talked about more than the superhero books and everything else that's out there right now. Because I think indie comics are saying what's happening in the world right now, and they're doing it without any reservations or without any censorship. It feels like the underground comics from the 60s or something, and I want to see more of that.
I don't think that's a harsh or standoffish view at all, unless you're simping for corporations.
Bootlicker.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's. I think that's, and if you are finding Nick's words and ideals offensive in that way, maybe think about
and
why.
The thing is that I realize, like, there's heroes and villains in all of this, and there's a lot of shades of gray. Not everybody's right, not everybody's wrong in these instances. And I'm not saying anything wrong about these larger corporations. Please hire me. What I am saying is that there should be greater care and consideration put towards these artists, and especially when you are making more money than God, let's say, with some of these properties, and people are not getting back even a small percentage of what is being earned and made. That hurts me deeply on a philosophical level, on an integral level, everything along those lines.
On a human level.
On a human level, exactly. Yeah. And so...
Yeah, I don't think Sarah Pichelli was seeing much from Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you can't make great corporate work. I mean, like what you guys are doing with the sort of crisis events right now is really off the beaten path. You know what I mean? It's something that you wouldn't necessarily see, but it's refreshing that we are. And I hope that a lot of editors are listening and creatives that are listening take chances on these weird books. That's what was happening in the 60s. That's why we have these iconic characters. That's why we have all that stuff, is people weren't afraid to take chances and just kind of break the mold. I
was talking to a retailer the other day and about a sort of crisis events, and like my co-creator Dennis Camp, and Dennis Camp is writing Absolute Martian Manhunter for DC, which is not your typical DC book.
Your typical DC character, kind of underrated.
Yeah, and that retailer was saying that he ordered like 25 copies, with the understanding that he's probably gonna only sell like a third of these, and because he saw the art and he's like, typical DC readers don't like this kind of art, but it's an absolute book, so I'll order a bunch. And he sold out through the entire thing, and he was shocked. So that's an example of a DC taking a chance and doing a book that is not your typical DC book, and it really paying off. So it can be done at the big two, at least.
I think so. And I mean, there's some fantastic work still coming out of there, right? Like, it would be totally remiss of me not to mention, like, the stuff that Greg Smallwood's doing, right? Like,
yes,
really, absolutely brilliant work, man. And, or Chris Samnee. I mean, Chris Samnee is probably the biggest comics genius of modern times there is, right? Like, I hate looking at his work because I get so jealous every time I look at it. It's wild. It's like, how does someone have that much talent? It really is staggering. So there's some great stuff being produced, absolutely, and there are some fantastic artists. The artists that I've been able to collaborate or speak with in regards to this stuff, they have just such a passion and a fervor behind their work. How can you not get excited about it, And I think we just need more of that. What people need to do when they come out to these cons and stuff like that, instead of tracking down your favorite books, I mean, go do that. Find your floppies, the collections that you want to finish. Absolutely. That's like why we all go. But take some time and go to Artist Alley and talk to artists. Talk about their process. Talk about what motivates them. Talk about why they're doing this. And you'll get a really good sense that comics are a lot more expansive and unique than I think people, initially give them. And I know the people in the know that, but, to the average layman, they might not necessarily see that or understand exactly what goes into making comics and exactly the heart that is put behind something like that,
Couldn't agree more. So this was a really fun episode, and you brought a lot to this conversation, that a lot of knowledge on this particular subject that I think the three of us don't necessarily fully have similarly to you. I don't know how to talk anymore. Anyway, we want to do future Alex Toth episodes. So it would be amazing if you can come back for more of that.
Yes, please.
I certainly would love to. And I mean, Alex, as I had mentioned earlier on in the podcast, is one that really helped me understand storytelling. I was studying a lot of the European guys for a long time. Like Mobius, for instance, was a huge influence to me. For years, I tried to draw like Mobius.
Oh, yeah.
And it didn't work because, it's like this guy was so esoteric, so weird, so out there. It's just, I wasn't able to grasp it. I was able to kind of understand his style and some of the nuances, but he was just fully of his own kind of thing. And when I look at a lot of those European artists, I felt the same way. And immediately when I saw Alex's work, there was a grounding there where it's like, oh, this makes sense to me. And I feel like I could do this too if I really tried,
Cool.
And that was one of the things that really always inspired me. And so I spent a long time, actually learning how to draw, not like him, but kind of try to understand the mentality of what he was doing when he was drawing, and then kind of approach it that way. And he's been the best teacher. I've never met him. I mean, he's passed on now. And when I got into his work, he had already, I think it was a couple years after he had died. So I never really got that chance to interact with him. But I can absolutely say with great certainty, he's been the best teacher I've ever had.
Right on.
Very cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one thing before we go, I have a Black Canary print that I I did.
Oh yeah, I wanted to show that off because that's very inspired
it's
by.
It's a little hard to see because there's the reflection of the light, but this is actually.
Well, I'll be sure to put the image up in the edit. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
And,
Thank
and you have that for sale somewhere?
Well, I do have it for sale. You can just contact me via email, and I can set something up for you. But I still have to update my store on my website. Sorry about that, guys. But this one I'd like to give away to one of our lucky listeners. I don't know if you want to do a lottery or something along those lines, or if maybe we can do based on comment engagement or something along those lines. Just send something out for them. If they're big Black Canary fans.
Oh, gorgeous! Just look at that. Damn.
Yeah, just say thank you and hopefully it'll turn you on to Alex's work and more Black Canary stuff, obviously too, right?
Yeah. So how should we do that? I guess if you're interested in the print, then just comment below, and I guess we'll pick someone at random.
Yeah, we could put it into like a random draw. We'll just take whoever makes a comment. How about we say we'll make an executive decision. Whoever comments, we'll put you in a draw, and then we can contact you after with sending that out to you.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Thank you, Nickolej.
So if you stuck around to the end, you know what to do.
Not to create more work for you guys, but I figure it'd be something nice for your listeners.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Okay, yeah. Shall we close it out? Yeah, let's close it out.
Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.